hellhounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hellhounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 6 scary stories to sink our hellish teeth into. Don't forget to like the video, as this really helps the channel. And if you want to see lots more of these spooky stories, then don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then join my subreddit r/homeofscares. And don't forget to join me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, let's get right into it. My one and only experience, posted by CMC335. This story happened about a year and a half ago. I have only ever shared this story with one other person, the other person who is actually in this story. A little about me. I have a formal education in the hard sciences, and I am halfway through a Doctor of Medicine degree program. So those are the lenses through which I see the world. This makes me a natural skeptic on most things. I firmly believe in the existence of extraterrestrial life because the vastness of the universe makes it a mathematical certainty. But I am far less convinced on the subject of UFOs, although there are a number of well-documented events that keep me from dismissing them outright. This story has nothing to do with aliens, though at least I don't think it does. I guess I only mention it for the purposes of demonstrating that I keep an open mind on things, but that I still need to see at least some sort of suggestive evidence. I am a huge fan of the paranormal as a genre. I find the stories and media fun and entertaining. I like being scared, and I enjoy the experience of reflecting on what if. But it's always been just that to me, a genre of entertainment. Then this happened, and I still can't explain it. My fiance and I grew up and live in a small city in New England. Honestly, it's really only a city by definition. It's bigger than your average New England town, but it's far more suburban than your average city. The house my family has lived in since I was 2 is located on the outskirts of this city. I am now almost 30, and although my fiancée and I live in an apartment below her mum's place, I still keep a lot of my stuff there at my old house, including my motorcycle. When you pull out of the driveway and go one way, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to get into the city proper, but if you go the other way, it takes about 2 minutes to hit farmland. Heading towards the farms, you end up on a road called Pine Hill Road. On this road is a very old cemetery with gravestones that date as far back as the 1700s. The cemetery encompasses a square plot of land bordered on 3 sides by trees and by Pine Hill Road on the 4th. The official name of this cemetery is Pine Hill Cemetery, but everybody in the area calls it by its other name, Blood Cemetery. It is allegedly one of the most haunted cemeteries in New England. The name derives from the Blood family burial plot, located more or less in the center of the grounds, and is where most of the alleged activity arises, tangibly. The blood headstone is engraved with the image of a hand, and it is said that during the day this hand points upwards towards the heavens, while at night it points down towards the ground. It is also said that the ghost of Abel Blood roams the grounds. It is illegal to enter a cemetery at night here, and the police do patrol this area because of how frequently people try to go in at night to see for themselves. I personally have never actually been inside the grounds, day or night, not even during the experience I'm about to describe. By the way, I've used the real name of the place. Feel free to Google this cemetery all you want. That way you will know I'm talking about a real place with real stories attached to it. What I am about to describe is not a creepypasta. This really happened to me. I've driven past this cemetery 1,000,000 times before, day and night, and not once have I ever seen or experienced anything out of the ordinary. That is, not until one night last fall. It must have been around late August or early September 2017, when summer was on its way out and fall was just starting to let everyone know it was on its way. It was late and dark one night when my fiancée and I were out for a ride on my motorcycle. We love riding around this area because there is little traffic. The roads are just windy enough to make it fun, and the farms are beautiful. We were riding up Pine Hill Road and were just beginning to pass Blood on the left, as we've done so many times before. Going about 30 miles per hour, it must only take 3 to 5 seconds to pass the whole property, but this time something very strange happened to me. Time appeared to slow down when something red reflected across the visor of my helmet. I turned my head to the left, and this is what I saw. Up in a tree just along the left border of the cemetery was a floating orb of the brightest red light I have ever seen. So bright it was that its center was white. Orb isn't really the right way to describe it, because it wasn't just a sphere of red light. It looked like it was oozing and dripping, like it was made of plasma. The best way I can think to describe it is that it looked like the tip of a signal flare when it's held off the ground. It was that bright, and it was oozing like the tip of a flare, but it was not shooting out from anything like a flare does. Where a flare has a sort of elongated shape from the sparks shooting out of the end, this was circular, and unlike a flare, there was no visibly physical object from which this drippy, burning orb emanated from. It just was. It was bright, and it was oozing, and it was dripping, and it was floating up in a tree. I really can't underscore enough just how bright this thing was to me. Then I noticed the rest. Moving around this red orb was a set of hands. I didn't notice them at first because of how bright the orb was and how dark the wood was, but as my eyes began to focus somewhat, I realized that there was something else in the tree with the orb, and it looked like it was actually conjuring the orb. The thing was humanoid looking, but it didn't look human at all. It looked like a scrawny and lanky E.T. phone home sort of thing, with nubby joint fingers and features, but with scrawny limbs. Its face was long, narrow at the top and bottom, but wide in the middle. It was bumpy. It was a face unlike any human face I've ever seen before, and I've seen a lot of deformed faces. Lepromaceous faces, hypoplastic faces, coarse faces, faces without calvaria. Hell, I've even seen a real cyclops. Yes, cyclopses really do exist, and it's actually quite a sad thing, because cyclopia results from a condition that also prevents the brain from dividing, and the baby is usually stillborn. This thing's face looked like it was from hell. Its skin looked dark brown, and it appeared to be wearing some sort of baggy looking cloak. Its legs were crossed, its hands circling around this extremely bright oozing red orb, and it was hovering a few inches over a branch in the tree. Passing the cemetery on my motorcycle that night felt like the longest 3 to 5 seconds of my life. As we came to the other end of the cemetery, time appeared to resume itself as normal. I looked back over my shoulder, and it was gone. I looked back again, still gone. Twice more I looked back, twice more it was nowhere to be seen. I immediately pulled over, and my fiancée asked me what was wrong, because she knows I never pull my bike over to the side of the road unless something is up and I have to, especially when it's dark, and especially not on these windy roads where people tend to drive like a bat out of hell. I can't blame them, these roads are fun. "Did you see that back there?" I asked her. "See what?" she asked. "That red light we passed back at the cemetery just now." "Red light?" she asked, a little confused. Turns out she hadn't seen a damn thing. Nothing. I explained to her what I had just seen, or experienced, or whatever it was that happened. She believed me, noted how I looked visibly disturbed by something. But whatever that something was, she hadn't seen any of it. It was dark, and we were moving, so normally I wouldn't have been so surprised by her not seeing something like a figure up in a tree we'd passed, but that orb of light, it was just so damn bright. There were no cars around, no houses from which a porch light could have been peering through those particular trees. There were no lights in the sky, no planes or helicopters around, and no explanation as to why only I saw this. I've never been diagnosed with mental illness, and I don't have a substance abuse problem, and I certainly wouldn't have myself and the mother of my future children together on a bloody motorcycle if I was high or drunk. I've never had a seizure or been told that I've had seizures. I've never had hallucinations, and I've never experienced anything like this before, or anything like it again since. I've driven past blood numerous times since then, and every time it's just been its normal, old, sleepy self. Edit. The story happened now about 3.5 years ago, still vivid in my memory, and my fiance is now my ex. He became real, posted by Deadly Demon Dreams. I don't know where to start from. I'm still in shock for what happened yesterday. I'll start with the context. After having reoccurring dreams about a demon, weird things started happening around me. Strange whispers at night, doors opening and closing, so it basically led me to believe I was being haunted. But they were just dreams, right? Exactly. Nothing else could happen. I was so wrong. Yesterday, the same demon that was haunting me came to my school. It may sound crazy, but he is real. He sat next to me. He didn't speak, but he was staring at me constantly. And with the mask, it was impossible to decipher what expression he was making. His blue eyes pierced my soul right through. It had a horrible feeling, the kind of feeling you get when you have seen hell. It was pure evil. He looked like any other teen. He looked normal and wore normal clothes, and that only made things more disturbing. The craziest thing happened when it was break time. He approached me and told me, "We need to talk." I internally said, "Nope, nope, nope," and tried to flee, but he took my hand, and it felt like I put a fork inside an electrical outlet and then grabbed it. He electrocuted me, and I literally screamed. He let go and glanced at me one last time before running away. I was so confused and scared. I didn't know what to do. Today, he didn't show up, and none of my classmates seemed to notice it either. I asked them, but no one remembered him. They didn't even know a new classmate was coming in. I told them he came yesterday, but they told me that they didn't notice anything. He just vanished. Why is this happening to me? I think something's following me and I don't know what to do. Posted by Acceptable Cup 4251. Something has been tormenting me since I played with a Ouija board. When I, female 19, was 14, I was sent to a boarding school a couple of hours away from my house. I actually really enjoyed it, and I thought living in a house full of my best friends was the best thing ever. I spent about 3 years there. When I was 15, in year 10, I stayed in one of 4 dorms in the house, being D dorm. Now, there was a rumour that D form was haunted because of lights that would flicker and things of that sort, but nothing ever remotely extreme, and frankly I still didn't believe in any sort of paranormal activity, so the rumours went completely over my head. My friends alike. One day though, I overheard a group of my friends doing something in the room next to me. The walls between rooms didn't reach the ceiling, and so you could hear everything throughout the dorm most of the time. I went to investigate what my friends were doing and found that one of my best friends, Brittany, had brought a Ouija board along with her and was playing it with a group of our friends. I was somewhat fascinated, since I'd heard about it when I was really young, but never actually had the opportunity arise to see one in action. So there I am, watching and bantering with my friends as they played it, along with my friend Jess, who was spelling out on the notes of her phone each thing that the board was saying. The girls were asking it things like their birthdays, things like that. At one point, the girls asked me to get a student that none of us knew, so I went and invited one of the Chinese exchange students to come into the room. This was someone none of us had spoken to. The girls asked the Ouija board her birthday and were pretty shocked when the board gave them a birthday which the student confirmed as hers, since none of us had been friends with her. After that, everyone decided to stop playing. That is, everyone except for Brittany, who invited me to play it with her. God, I wish I never touched that thing. But I agreed, and so we continued to play with it, just Brittany and I in the room alone, with Jess, who was still writing out the letters. I was the one orchestrating the session, asking simple questions like, is anything here with us? Give us a sign if you're here, etc. After receiving yes, but no spooky sign, I asked the entity what its name was, to which the planchette began to go back and forth spelling Z-O, 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 Z-O. Brittany and I had no idea what this meant at the time, so we weren't exactly moved by it. That is, until Jess googled it, and without telling us what came up, ordered us to stop playing at that second. We took our hands off and didn't say goodbye. Jess revealed her phone screen to us, and to our shock, it was a reference to the name of a supposed demon, Zozo, which gained notoriety lurking on Ouija boards, and had even had a movie made about it. We were creeped out, but nothing too crazy. Every night for the following 3 weeks, Brittany and I both woke up every night at 3 a.m, feeling strange, and we're both having horrific nightmares. This continued for exactly 3 weeks, and started and stopped for us both on the same days. After the nightmares stopped, I didn't pay much mind to what had happened, as demonic energetic attachment was the last thing on my mind really, and just put the strange dreams and awakenings to anything else subconsciously, I guess. For the following year, her and I both didn't experience anything out of the normal. That is, nothing I registered as strange anyway. After a year, I moved away to Europe, and this is where the activity peaked. We moved into a modern but old house. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary with the house, but pretty quickly I began feeling strange, occasionally feeling watched pretty intensely, things moving on their own in front of me, seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes, doors slamming, the attic lights switching on and off when the door was locked, hearing knocks from the attic, feeling a presence go from the room I was in into the stuffed bear next to me, extremely intensely. My grandma's old wind-up music box playing on its own. Just an all-round feeling of just something being off. In general, the activity would only happen when I was alone, and I would tell my family, but they would just brush it off, as all in my head other than my sister, who also told me she felt weird in the house. That is until one day where my mum called me into her room to show me one of her coat hangers swinging back and forth wildly. This opened her mind ever so slightly, but she continued to brush it off. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense. Looking back, there was actually some really freaky shit going on in that place. I recall one time I was home alone for a few weeks, where I was sitting in my bed watching TV at around 2 in the morning when I felt something sit on the end of my bed. The blanket moved and there was an impression where this weight had come onto. On top of this, I could feel something staring straight at me. One of the most unsettling things that happened to me in that house, though, was an occasion where my big sister, who is my best friend, and I were hanging out in her room, where we always spent time together. When you walk into the room, directly opposite the door, leaning against the far wall, was a large, full-body mirror that we used to look at our outfits, rarely ever getting close enough to touch, and always being able to see any marks on it, since it was the first thing you'd see when you'd enter the room. One night her and I were on her bed when she got up to go to the bathroom. Upon re-entering the room, my sister asked me, "You touched the mirror?" I said no, and my sister went pale and pointed at the mirror. When I saw it, my blood ran fucking cold. Right on the mirror was the biggest handprint I've ever seen in my life. This thing was roughly 35 centimeters long and was intact. You could see the mark of each joint of the fingers, and it was clearly not dragged or out there earlier, because, as I said, it's the first thing you see when you enter the room. I just about shat myself. We called for my mum to look at it, and she attempted to tell us that it was a dragged print from maybe an attempt to move the mirror, a claim we contested heavily. Another disturbing occurrence was a time where I had left an unfinished painting sitting vertically inside my room. However, the face of the girl in my painting was horizontal. When I woke up, the painting has a very clear tears running down the girl's face, horizontally. I also had a vision kind of experience once when I was drifting off to sleep, where I saw a multitude, maybe 7 or 8, very demonic or spooky looking faces staring at me while I had my eyes closed. I never experienced anything similar before or after that, but I can still see the faces if I think of them. Many unexplainable things happened to me over the 3 years we lived in the house, and needless to say, it was a relief and a fucking half to have moved out, and to another country at that. For about 3 weeks after we moved out of the house, the strange feelings and occurrences subsided. That is, until one night where I woke up wide awake around 5 AM with a very intense feeling of dread. I was able to get back to sleep. The following night, my sister and I were sleeping in the same bed, and I had an extremely vivid dream of watching myself and my sister sleeping from the perspective of something that was in the top left corner of my room. Needless to say, I was pretty unsettled at the thought that this entity had followed me. I don't know if it came from the board or if it came from the house, but recently it's getting worse, and it's getting worse quickly. I was at a girlfriend's house about a month ago with her and 3 dudes when I started talking about it. Upon talking about it, all doors in the house slammed except for one, the bathroom door, which was in view for all of us, which began to open and close wildly. This scared the absolute shit out of me, and Sarah could tell. So she locked the door and we decided to stop talking about it. This is where things begin to get a little crazier, but I swear to God I'm not crazy. At least I'm pretty grounded and in touch with reality, and I really experienced this. It was the same night, and I had gone to sleep downstairs at around 1:40 AM after a night of drinking and smoking weed, so I was pretty ready to sleep and should have had little issue with sleeping well. I woke around 3:30 feeling very, very uncomfortable. Sarah had actually told me the previous owner of the house had died in the room above me, which didn't help. I tried and tried to get to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I was about to drift off into sleep, it was like something jerked me awake. This was until about 6 in the morning, where I was trying to get to sleep, when I began to hear a sound which can be compared to the sound of rushing water or TV static in my left ear. This went on for about 3 seconds until the sound became background sound. So, to a somewhat raspy whisper-like voice which told me to come, 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 come. This experience really freaked me out, and the occurrences have been getting worse since. Rather than feeling watched only at home or when I'm alone, it's begun to happen when I'm in public, in the car during the day and at night. I've also been seeing shadowy figures in my peripheral vision multiple times a day. I've also had the sensation of being touched by something when I'm alone at night, either on my phone, in bed, or trying to sleep. The feeling is like a kinda of staticky electric pins and needles-ish feeling, but it's very clear I have felt it on my arms, my hands and thighs. I've felt it on my backside too. This thing will move things ever so slightly when I look at them. If I'm with people or do things like make lights go off, as I look at them when I'm with people, which I have assumed is it subtly making its presence known to me. About 2 weeks ago, I had a dream where I was getting into the car and I saw the same handprint from the mirror, only a lot bigger, on the seat. It grabbed me by the throat and I woke up. I guess I should have mentioned I've had somewhat bad luck after moving into the original house too, with my very tight-knit family completely falling apart, being sexually assaulted on 2 occasions, and the death of a friend. I don't know if these have anything to do with it, but I guess it's worth mentioning. I know it might sound crazy, but I really just don't know what to do at this point. It's freaking me out, and I want whatever the fuck this thing is to stay far away from me for good, and I don't know where to turn to for help. I'm not religious, but tomorrow I plan on going to a church to speak to anyone I can about it. The basement and the bedroom, posted by Maple Leaf Creations. The basement. This happened a few years ago, and I have never liked basements since. It was late in the day, sometime not long after dark, and I was doing my laundry. I had just moved the wet clothes into the dryer and was going upstairs. I turned off the basement light using the basement switch and looked over to the back corner. I always did this because I've always felt something down there, and I saw this black half ball shaped shadow figure that was about 2.5 foot in diameter and about 1.5 foot tall, come speeding towards me at the stairs. I ran upstairs and slammed the door as fast as I could. The reason I believe this is paranormal is because we smudged later that night and I have never seen it again. The bedroom. This happened maybe a year before story 1. I lived in a duplex. Story 1, I lived upstairs, and story 2, I had moved downstairs. So same house, both stories. It was late at night and I was about to go to bed, and for some reason I decided to sleep facing the foot of the bed this time, closest to the door, and at this time I always slept with my door open. I was just ready to go to sleep when I looked out into my doorway, into the hallway, and I saw this black human-shaped shadow figure, about average height, standing in the hallway in front of my bedroom door. I closed my eyes because of pure reaction and when I opened them again, it was gone. As I was writing this, I realised that this is probably the same entity as story 1. My Hatman encounter, posted by TuckJess40. I was invited here by an admin, so first of all, thank you. I have so many experiences to share with everyone, nearly 38 years worth to be exact. So, without further ado, here is one of the very first paranormal experiences that I remember. Enjoy. This happened one holiday weekend, the Saturday night before Easter. I was a 5-year-old little girl living in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment with my mom, single at the time, and my brother 10 years older. I was sleeping on the bottom bunk of the beds my brother and I shared. I was alone in the room since my brother was staying with his father for the holidays. I wake up and have to use the toilet. I go and do my business and wash my hands like a good big girl does. I loved being independent and doing things for myself, like any normal child at that age. Everything is normal until I walk back into my room. I see someone standing in the corner. I didn't blink, move, or even breathe. I just froze in such fear I couldn't think. This wasn't just a burglar or something. This figure was standing in the dark corner of my room. It looks like a man, only he is made out of complete shadow, like darker than the darkest black. I can make out the outline of his body shape and what looked like a trench coat and top hat. The clothes were also all shadowy like his body, no features on the face, like there is a ski mask over it without the eye and mouth holes. This isn't the scariest part though. What happened next has been ingrained into my memory so badly that I still recall even the smallest details of the experience. The figure raises one of his arms and points one long finger towards my bed. I had been standing next to it the entire time, having stopped to stare at the figure. Like most children, I had a favourite kiddie blanket that went everywhere with me. Mine was a Sesame Street blanket with a picture of Big Bird and Cookie Monster on it. This blanket, of course, was on my bed. When I turned to look what the figure was pointing at, I see that my blanket sort of melts. Then it morphs into thousands and thousands of bugs, spiders, cockroaches, centipedes, all the creepy crawly things you can imagine. They swarm and cover everything. Next thing I know, my mom is shaking me and I'm screaming and crying like I'm being murdered. All is back to normal and the figure is gone. The entire day after, I refused to allow my mom to take me off her hip. She had to carry me around like that for all of the Easter Sunday. I even refused to go hunting for Easter eggs with my cousins, and that is something I always enjoyed doing. Mom tells this story to family members every Easter holiday now. Only, she says, I had a nightmare and woke up screaming about bugs. I know that isn't true. I know I was fully awake and I have never forgotten it. The paranormal is real. The madness overtook me. I couldn't stop it. Posted by Avenseyu. It started slowly, a few here and there. I didn't notice it until my brother Nathan disappeared. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. Nobody seemed to remember him except me. Everyone is disappearing, being forgotten. I am afraid I might be next. Why does nobody remember? I tried convincing my mom, my dad, my co-workers, anyone who would listen. I told them the day I told my mom went something like this. Mum, I have something to tell you. You won't believe me. I know, but you have to listen. You have to listen. Whoa, honey, slow down. What are you talking about? Of course, I will believe you. Mom, people are disappearing. Nathan disappeared. You have to have noticed, right? You have to have noticed he was gone. He was here, and then he just wasn't. He just disappeared into thin air. Nobody remembers him, but you have to, right? I pleaded with her, bordering insanity, mumbling incoherently. My panic was reaching a point that I could not come down from. What? Who is Nathan? One of your friends? What are you talking about? He just disappeared. My mum was looking at me with concern. Like that look you would give an abandoned puppy. I hated it. She didn't believe me either. Of course she didn't. How could she? What do you mean? Who is Nathan? He is your son, my brother. You don't remember. I knew you wouldn't, but why? Why is this? I broke down into tears, panic getting the better of me. Sam, are you okay? Do you need to take a rest? Did something happen? What's wrong? She thought I was going crazy. I had to get away. I had to. There was no other option. I ran. I turned and sprinted out of the gaping front door. I stumbled down the stairs to the driveway, my mum calling after me with concern. After that, it sped up. People started disappearing faster than before. The rate of disappearances was exponentially rising. I was running out of time. I ran to my friend V's house and I told her, V, something is happening. People are disappearing and nobody is even noticing. What are you even talking about? She looked shocked. I pulled her aside and into her open garage. People are disappearing. Nathan, my brother, disappeared. I don't know who else, but we might be next. Are you okay? V looked at me with serious concern, but her gaze contained something different as well. She looked at me with that quiet glimmer of fear. She was scared of me. She thought I was crazy too. What did I expect? Really? She asked, the fire of worry burning in her eyes. Yes, you have to believe me. I looked at her, completely serious. I was dead set on figuring out what was happening here. Okay, I believe you. She still looked worried, but the fear washed out of her face. She tried to give a reassuring smile, but it was just weak. Really? You believe me? Relief and sanity washed over me. Finally, someone didn't think I was mental. Someone who thought I was sane. This was my chance to figure this out. Wait, what is happening to me? Sam, help, V cried out. She was starting to fade, just like Nathan had. Within seconds, she was gone. Tears welled in my eyes, and fear overtook me. Fear that I might be going insane. Fear that I am all alone. Fear I will never see my friends and family again. I burst into her house and called out for her parents. No response. I ran outside and began knocking on every door in sight. No answer. I slammed on doorbells, kicked on doors, but it was no use. Everyone was gone, and there was nothing I could do. I was left alone on a desolate earth to rot, and nobody could save me. I succumbed to the madness and let it overtake me. No use in fighting. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. If you have any scary stories, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.